The war drums had already started when Tessa Hale realized 3,000 men were about to ride into a grave. Outside the western walls of Stonehaven, horses screamed against their bits, armor clattered in the dark, and thousands of boots ground frost into the courtyard stones. Dawn was still an hour away. Snow moved sideways across the torchlight, catching on spearheads and black fur cloaks. Inside the war hall, men with gold at their throats stood around a carved map table, arguing over rivers, passes, and how many bodies could be lost before victory became too expensive. Tessa had been sent in with ink. That was all. She crossed the hall with both hands around the wooden case and did what she had trained herself to do since childhood. Count the doors, note the guards, never turn her back on the only exit. At the far end of the table stood Alpha King Ronan Ashford. He wore no crown. He did not need one. The room bent around him anyway. Ronan stood broad-shouldered beneath a dark military coat, one hand planted beside a map of Blackwater Pass. He listened without moving, while Marshal Lucien Voss read from a sealed sheet. "First Legion crosses Blackwater before sunrise," Lucien said. "Second Legion follows at 30-minute distance. Cavalry takes the eastern shelf and closes the pass behind them." Tessa stopped. Lucien continued. "Once the northern ridge is secured, the king's banner advances to Red Hollow." Tessa stared at the page in his hands. The paper was right. The seal was right. The ink was wrong. A royal battle order was written with iron gall darkened by ash. It dried flat and swallowed light. The letters on Lucien's page caught the brazier beside him with the faintest blue sheen. Pineresen. Good enough to imitate royal black. Wrong enough to kill an army. Tessa stepped toward the table. "Don't send them." The room went silent. Lucien turned first. Silver-haired, straight-backed, calm. "What did you say?" Tessa looked past him to Ronan. "Don't send them through Blackwater." A few officers laughed. Someone muttered, "Omega." Ronan did not. His gray eyes settled on her. "Who are you?" "Tessa Hale, Lower Archive." "And why is someone from my Lower Archive interrupting a war council?" "Because that order is wrong." The laughter stopped. Lucien folded the parchment. "My king, I'll have her removed." The royal aide beside him reached for the document. If he took it to Ronan, the king would countersign it. If he countersigned it, the gates would open. Tessa moved before fear could catch her. She tore the order from Lucien's hand and threw it into the central brazier. The hall exploded. A captain grabbed for her. Steel hissed from a scabbard. The parchment curled black in the flames. Ronan came around the table. He did not raise his voice. "Do you understand what you just burned?" 2 guards seized Tessa by the arms. She kept her eyes on the fire. 3,000 men. A beat. If you obeyed it. Something changed in Ronan's face. Not belief. Attention. His gaze dropped to the burning parchment, then returned to her. Tessa had seen powerful men react to embarrassment before. They usually became louder. Ronan only became quieter. For one brief second, she wondered whether she had saved an army only to condemn herself. Lucien stepped forward. "This is sabotage." "Chain her," Ronan said. Iron closed around Tessa's wrists. The guards pulled her backward as officers spoke over one another, one calling for a replacement copy, another demanding the gates remain closed. Then a crash shook the eastern doors. Every head turned. The second impact tore one hinge free. The doors burst inward. Snow blew across the floor. Ghost entered with blood on his muzzle. The royal wolf was enormous. Silver-gray fur darkened along his chest, breath steaming between his teeth. He ignored the weapons rising around him and backed into the hall, dragging something by the cloak. A body. The dead man's heels struck the stones as Ghost pulled him into the torchlight and dropped him beside the map table. No one spoke. Tessa knew the cloak before she saw the face. Royal Courier. Black wool, silver shoulder braid, red wax token at the collar. Lucien bent over the corpse. "Damn it." Ronan's gaze sharpened. Tessa stepped as far forward as her chains allowed. The name came back from the dispatch ledger she had copied less than 2 hours earlier. Jonas Reed. Assigned to the western route. Recorded at the gate at midnight. Recorded as the man who had delivered the order Tessa had just burned. But frost clung to his beard. His boots were stiff. The blood beneath him had already darkened. He had been dead for hours. A murmur moved through the officers and died almost immediately. Someone whispered that the gate ledger had to be wrong. Tessa knew better. She had copied the entry herself. Ronan looked at the corpse, then at the brazier, then at Tessa. Finally, the Alpha King turned to his guards. Nobody leaves this room. His voice carried no anger now, only something colder. Tessa looked down at Jonas Reed and felt the first true edge of fear slide beneath her ribs. Because if the king's courier had died before reaching Stonehaven, someone else had walked through the gates wearing his authority. Someone else had carried the order. Someone inside this room might already know who, and 3,000 men had almost followed it to their deaths. Nobody moved until Ronan told them to. The doors were barred. Guards doubled at every exit. Jonas Reed's body remained beside the war table beneath a dark cloak, while Ghost lay across the dead courier's boots, watching the room as if he expected someone to try to take him away. Tessa stood 10 feet from the brazier with iron around her wrists. Marshal Lucien Voss broke the silence first. "My king, whatever happened to Reed, the army cannot remain in the courtyard while the border is exposed." "The army remains where it is," Ronan said. "Blackwater is the fastest route to Red Hollow, and someone murdered a royal courier to make certain I used it." Ronan turned to Tessa. "You said the order was wrong. I said the ink was wrong. Then prove it." Tessa lifted her chained hands. "I need the piece that didn't burn." A captain scoffed. "You expect us to dig through ash because an archive girl recognizes ink?" "No, because 3,000 soldiers are waiting outside." Ronan's mouth tightened. "Find it." A guard pulled a curled fragment from the brazier with iron tongs. Part of the final line and half the wax seal had survived. "Bring the lamp closer," Tessa said. Lucien did it himself. He held the flame near the parchment while Tessa tilted the fragment. At first the letters remained black, then the heat reached the fibers. A faint blue sheen surfaced across the strokes. Tessa pointed. "Royal battle ink is iron gall mixed with ash. It dries dull. It does not shine under heat." Lucien studied it. "And this?" "Pine resin. Mountain couriers use it to help cheap ink survive snow." A captain frowned. "Anyone can buy pine resin." "Yes, which means this alone proves only that the order was not written in the royal scriptorium." She turned the fragment. "And that is the problem. Half the royal seal remained, but half was enough." The wolf's head was pressed deep into the wax. Above its ears, the crown line dipped slightly on the left where the original signet had been damaged years earlier. Counterfeiters usually made the crown perfect. This one carried the flaw. This one was real. The room changed. Ronan stepped closer. "You're certain?" "My father taught me to check seals before I learned to read orders." The words escaped before she could stop them. Ronan noticed, but did not ask. Lucien lowered the lamp. "Then someone wrote a false command and sealed it with the king's signet, or with access to something capable of making the same impression," Tessa said. Ronan's eyes narrowed. "Meaning?" "One possibility is that your seal was copied." She looked around the locked war hall. "The other is that whoever did this can touch the real one." No one spoke after that. Ronan turned to his guard captain. "Send 6 riders to Blackwater. No banners, no horns. Observe and return." Lucien stepped forward. "If the pass is clear, we lose the advantage of darkness. If it is clear, we leave late." Ronan glanced at Jonas Reed's body. "If it isn't, we learn what this order was meant to buy." The scouts returned 43 minutes after sunrise. Only 5 riders came back. Their captain staggered into the hall with an arrow lodged through his shoulder leather. Snow clung to his beard. Blood ran down his sleeve. "Ambush," he said. The room froze. Archers above the western shelf. Stakes buried beneath the lower snow. Oil jars along the choke point. Lucien's face went still. "How many?" "Enough to trap the First Legion inside the pass." No one looked at Tessa. They looked at the ashes. Ronan crossed the room, took a key from one of his guards, and unlocked the chain between her wrists. The cuffs remained. "You were right about Blackwater." Tessa rubbed the red skin beneath the iron. "About one thing. Right once does not make you innocent." "Good." Ronan raised an eyebrow. "I'd worry about a king who thought it did." One of the older officers nearly laughed. Ronan ignored him. "You recognize the ink. You recognize the seal. You know courier procedure." "Yes." Then until I say otherwise, you work for me. Tessa looked at the dead messenger. And the cuffs? They stay. Trusting. I'm not asking you to trust me. No, you're asking me to find whoever almost murdered your army. Ronan held her Gaza. Can you? Tessa looked at the barred doors, the ashes, and the genuine royal seal pressed into false words. Someone had not merely forged a document. They had redirected an army. Yes. Ronan nodded once. Then find out who. And somewhere inside Stonehaven, someone who had expected 3,000 soldiers to die at Blackwater learned that the Omega Girl from the lower archive was still alive. By noon, everyone in Stonehaven knew the Omega Girl from the lower archive had burned a royal battle order and somehow survived. By evening, half the castle had decided she was either a hero or a traitor. Tessa trusted neither version. Ronan moved her out of the servants' level and into a narrow room beside the royal archive, close enough to the guards that she could hear every shift change through the wall. There were no silk sheets, no fire large enough to roast an ox, no sudden reward for being useful. Just a bed, a wash basin, a locked cabinet, and 2 soldiers outside her door. Protection, apparently, came with hinges and steel. She chose the chair nearest the exit. The first guard noticed. The second pretended not to. At sunset, Ronan summoned her to the council chamber. 9 senior officers stood around the table. Lucian was already there, silver hair combed back, one hand resting on a stack of dispatches. The moment Tessa entered, conversation stopped. Lord Brenner, commander of the Eastern Garrison, looked at the cuffs still circling her wrists. We are allowing her into military records now? We are allowing her to identify whoever nearly buried your men in Blackwater, Ronan said. She could be part of it. She could, Ronan replied. Tessa almost respected him for saying it. Brenner pointed toward her. Then lock her in a cell until we know. Lucian spoke before Ronan could. If she wanted the king dead, she had only to remain silent. Brenner turned. Lucian's tone stayed mild. 3,000 soldiers would have marched into an ambush. The king would have been among them. Whatever else she may be, stupid is not one of her crimes. It was the closest thing to a defense Tessa had heard in years. She did not mistake it for kindness. Ronan looked at Lucian. You trust her? No. Lucian glanced at Tessa. I trust outcomes. That answer sounded honest enough to be dangerous. The meeting ended, with Tessa granted access to the courier ledgers under guard. No private correspondence, no sealed command archive, no weapons. Brenner complained twice. Ronan ignored him both times. The royal archive occupied 3 cold rooms cut into Stonehaven's inner wall. Shelves rose from floor to ceiling, packed with leather-bound ledgers and rolled maps. Tessa knew the place well enough to find the midnight dispatch register without help. She sat near the door. Ronan noticed. You always do that. Tessa looked up. Do what? Choose the chair closest to the exit. Her fingers tightened around the ledger. Walls look different when people want you trapped. Ronan's expression shifted, but he did not ask what she meant. Good. She opened the book. Jonas Reed's name appeared halfway down the page. Midnight entry, Western Gate. Dispatch received. Royal order delivered to War Hall. Tessa traced the ink with one finger. Who records these? The gate clerk, Ronan said. Always? Unless the clerk is relieved. Why? She leaned closer. The line above Reed's entry had been written with a broad nib. So had the line below it. Reed's entry was narrower. Different hand. Different pressure. She turned the page toward the lamp. There, a faint scraping beneath the words. Someone removed the original entry. Ronan bent beside her. With a knife? Pumice first, then a blade. See the fibers? He did. What was there before? I can't tell. But Reed was added later. Yes? Ronan's jaw hardened. Tessa checked the route ledger next. Jonas Reed had supposedly come through Eastwatch before reaching the Western Gate. That made no sense. Bring me his boots. Ronan did not ask why. An hour later, Ghost entered the archive with one of Reed's gloves in his jaws and the dead courier's boots carried behind him by a guard. Tessa turned one over. Pale dust had dried inside the heel seam. She rubbed it between thumb and finger. Limestone. Ronan frowned. Eastwatch is granite. The western road cuts through old limestone quarries. The king looked toward Ghost. The wolf was already at the door. Ronan took the glove, held it beneath Ghost's nose, and gave one quiet command. Find. Ghost surged into the corridor. Tessa closed the ledger. Ronan called for horses. I can walk, she said. It's 6 miles. I've walked farther. That wasn't a test. Something in the way he said it stopped her. Not pity, not command. Simple fact. In the courtyard, a brown mare waited beside Ronan's black stallion. Tessa stared at the saddle. You expect me to ride with these on? She lifted her cuffed wrists. Ronan stepped closer and unlocked them. This time, he removed the iron completely. If you run, he said, Ghost will find you. Tessa rubbed the raw circles around her skin. If I intended to run, I wouldn't have burned the order. For the first time, the corner of Ronan's mouth almost moved. Then Ghost barked from the outer gate. The moment vanished. Tessa mounted. Ahead of them, the royal wolf disappeared into the snow along the western road, the road Jonas Reed was never supposed to have taken. Ghost never slowed. He ran ahead through the western gate, nose low to the snow, silver-gray body cutting between black pines. Tessa kept her mare behind Ronan's stallion, fingers tight around the reins. The cuffs were gone, but the skin beneath them still burned where leather brushed her wrists. Stonehaven disappeared behind the trees. After the first mile, Tessa stopped watching Ghost and started watching the ground. Jonas Reed had been recorded as entering through East Watch, but the pale dust in his boots came from somewhere west of the castle, which meant either the ledger lied or his body had been moved after death. She preferred evidence that could not hold a pen. Slower, she called. Ghost had reached a fork where the road split around a ridge. He took the lower path. That road is abandoned, one guard said. Tessa studied the snow. Not abandoned enough. 2 sets of hoofprints had been brushed over with pine branches. A faint groove remained where packed snow had settled differently. Ronan dismounted. How many? 2 horses. Ghost barked farther down the trail. They followed. The abandoned road curved toward an old limestone cut. Years ago, the quarry route had collapsed and supply traffic had been redirected east. Except, someone had cleared a narrow passage through the fallen stone. Enough for horses, enough for a courier. Half a mile later, they found the signal station. It sat against the cliff, roof sagging beneath snow, one side of the watch platform broken. No smoke rose from the chimney. Ghost stood at the door, hackles raised. Ronan drew his sword. Stay behind me. Tessa saw the dark stain beneath the threshold and decided not to argue. Inside, the station smelled of wet ash, old leather, and blood. A brazier had been kicked over. Someone had burned papers recently. Tessa crouched beside the ashes. Don't touch anything. Using a broken spoon, she separated the charred scraps. Most were useless. Then she found a narrow strip of red wax cloth, the fabric royal couriers wrapped around sealed dispatch tubes in winter. She lifted it carefully, folded once across the center, twice at the corner, then tucked beneath. Her breath caught. What? Ronan asked. My father did this. Was it standard? No. She stared at the fold. He said official folds, wasted cloth. For 1 second she saw Elias Hale at their kitchen table, showing a 12-year-old girl how to wrap a message so snow could not reach the seal. Then Ghost growled. Love. Wrong. Tessa looked toward the window. When they arrived, blackbirds had crowded the pines. Now the branches were empty. Ronan. The first arrow hit the doorway. A guard jerked backward, steel punching through his shoulder. Down. 3 masked figures dropped from the ridge. Wolves. Not shifted, but fast enough that Tessa barely tracked them. Ronan met the first attacker at the doorway. Steel crashed. The second guard rushed outside. The third attacker did not enter. He ran uphill, toward a line, half buried beneath the snow. Arup. Tessa looked above him. The ridge was too clean. No brush. No animal tracks. No exposed stones. Someone had packed snow over something. Left, she shouted. Ronan drove his attacker into the wall. Move left. The wolf uphill cut the rope. The mountain came down. Logs snapped loose, then stone. Then a white wall of snow collapsed toward the station. Tessa threw herself behind a support beam. Ronan dragged the wounded guard after her. The man outside hesitated. Only a second. A boulder struck him across the back and drove him down before snow buried the ground around him. The station shook hard enough to split a roof beam. Somewhere beneath the snow, the buried guard made one short sound, and then nothing at all. Then, silence. Ronan burst through the broken doorway before the last stones stopped moving. The attackers were running. He caught one. The fight lasted seconds. The wolf slashed. Ronan broke his wrist, forced him into the snow, and set a blade beneath his jaw. "Who sent you?" The attacker smiled behind his mask, then bit down. His body seized. Ronan tore the cloth from his face, but foam already spilled from his mouth. Poison. Dead before he could answer. The other two disappeared into the trees. Ronan stood over the corpse, then looked toward the buried guard. Tessa stepped outside. "How did you know?" he asked. She pointed toward the ridge. The snow was wrong. Ronan followed her gaze. For the first time since Blackwater, he did not look at her as though he were deciding whether to believe her. He looked as though he was trying to understand how much everyone else had failed to see. Tessa opened her hand. The strip of red ceiling cloth lay across her palm. Her father's fold. 8 years after Elias Hale had been executed for forging royal orders, someone was still using a habit he had taught his daughter, and whoever had been waiting at this station had been willing to kill them to keep it buried. The dead guard returned to Stonehaven under a gray cloak. No one spoke when they carried him through the western gate. Snow fell steadily, covering the blood on the horses before they reached the courtyard. Tessa watched as the guard's wife ran down the steps and stopped when she saw the shape beneath the cloth. That sound stayed with her longer than the ambush. By nightfall, the red ceiling cloth from the signal station lay beneath glass in the Royal Archive. Ronan stood across the table while Tessa searched the old courier records. Ghost slept near the fire, one ear twitching whenever a page turned. "Your father used that fold," Ronan said. "Yes." "You're certain?" "I watched him do it hundreds of times." Tessa found the index for condemned royal couriers. Her finger stopped halfway down the page. Hale. Elias. Ronan saw the name at the same moment. Tessa pulled the case file. Inside were 5 forged military orders, a payment ledger, a statement from a gate officer, and the judgment sheet. She read until she reached the final document. Royal authorization for execution. At the bottom, beneath the black wolf crest, sat a signature she had seen on hundreds of decrees. Ronan Ashford. She placed the page between them. "You signed this?" Ronan did not look away. "Yes." "How old were you?" 28. "King?" "Crown Commander. My father was dying. I handled military judgments." "Did you speak to Elias Hale before you signed?" Ronan's silence answered first. "No." Tessa nodded once. Something inside her became very still. "My father begged for a hearing." "I know." "No. You know because it's written there." She tapped the page. "You didn't hear him." The evidence showed he forged battlefield orders and sold routes to enemy packs. 3 patrols died. My father knew every road in this kingdom. He could have run. He didn't. He stayed because he thought the truth mattered. Tessa looked at his signature. "Then you didn't execute a traitor." Ronan met her eyes. "You executed paperwork." Ghost lifted his head. Ronan took the words without flinching. "At the time, I believed the case was proven. And now? Now I know someone forged an order carrying my seal and murdered a courier to protect it. That isn't an answer." "No." He stepped closer. "Now I know I may have been wrong." "May have?" Ronan's face hardened, but not at her. "I will not clear your father because I feel guilty. If Elias Hale was innocent, I will prove it. If he was not, I will tell you that too." It was the first thing he could have said that did not make her hate him more. Tessa sat and pulled one of the forged orders from Elias's case. "Bring the brazier closer." Ronan did. She held the document above the heat. Slowly, the black letters caught the light. Blue. The same faint blue sheen as the Blackwater order. Her hand went cold. "The resin," Ronan said. "Yes." She tested a second document. Blue. Then a third. Blue again. All 5 orders used the same imitation royal ink. "Could your father have made it?" Ronan asked. "He could have learned the recipe." "That's not what I asked." Tessa opened a small notebook attached to the file. Most pages were work notes. One line had been underlined twice. "Pine resin bleeds in heat." Never use it for Crown Dispatch. He taught me that when I was 10. Ronan read the note. Tessa checked the gate officer's statement next. The witness claimed Elias had carried sealed tubes into the Western Records room after midnight, but the duty roster beside it showed Elias assigned to the Eastern stables that same night. Someone had built the case from documents that contradicted one another and trusted that no one would compare them. Tessa returned to the evidence ledger. The payment supposedly made to Elias had moved through a Western military account. Western. The signal station had been West. Jonas Reed had died on a Western road. The false Blackwater order had sent an army into a Western choke point. A pattern. Not proof. Not yet. Ronan pulled another document from the archive. It was dated 6 years earlier. 40 soldiers reassigned from North Ridge to a southern supply road. It carried his seal. Tessa held it near the brazier. Blue. Ronan went still. I never issued this. You remember? I remember that week. I was at North Ridge with a spear wound through my side. Stonehaven was 3 days away, by fast horse. The order had been sealed here. With Ronan absent, 8 years ago, Elias Hale had died for forging royal commands. 6 years ago, someone had continued issuing them. Yesterday, the same method had almost killed 3,000 soldiers. Tessa looked around at shelves holding decades of military records. If this started before my father died, she said, then he wasn't the conspiracy. Ronan's expression darkened. He found it, and someone made sure no one believed him. The fire cracked. Ghost rose and pressed his shoulder against Tessa's chair. She stared at Ronan's old signature on her father's death warrant. Whoever had killed Elias had survived him. Whoever had used the king's seal had survived 6 more years. And somewhere inside Stonehaven, someone had been standing close enough to Ronan all that time to keep writing wars in his name. The first accusation arrived before breakfast. Tessa was in the Royal Archive, with Elias Hale's case files spread across the table when Captain Brenner entered with 4 guards and a folded strip of parchment in his fist. Ronan came in seconds later. What happened? Tessa asked. Brenner threw the parchment onto the table. A border village burned before dawn, 23 dead. The raiders knew exactly when the watch changed. Tessa looked down. The symbols were small, written in columns rather than lines. Courier code. Her father's courier code. Where did you get this? Your room. She read the first groups, supply movements, guard rotations, a timestamp, enough information to guide an attack. This isn't mine. Brenner gave a humorless laugh. Convenient. Lucien Voss arrived last. He did not look angry. Somehow, that made it worse. He studied the parchment. Who had access to her quarters? 2 guards, Brenner said. Both swear no one entered. Then either they are lying, Lucien replied, or she wrote it. Tessa looked at Ronan. He was studying the code. Ask me something only the writer would know. Brenner folded his arms. We already know you can read it. I can read dozens of courier systems. This one belonged to your father. Yes. That helps you very little. Lucien raised a hand. Enough. If she intended to betray us, she has had better opportunities than this. Locking her in a dungeon before we understand the evidence would be foolish. For one dangerous second, relief touched Tessa. Lucien turned to Ronan. Put her somewhere secure. Remove her access to dispatch records until we know more. Reasonable. Measured. Protective, even. Which meant everyone could agree with it. Ronan finally faced her. Tessa, until this is resolved, you are suspended from the archive. You will remain under royal guard. Brenner frowned. My king. No cell. No interrogation without me present. Tessa barely heard him. 8 years ago, men had gathered papers around a table and decided her father was dangerous because the documents said so. Now they were doing it again. Only this time, Ronan stood close enough for her to watch. You believe I sent this? I believe I do not yet know who sent it. That isn't the same as believing me. No. The answer hurt because it was honest. Ronan stepped closer. I cannot allow you access to military records while evidence connects you to an attack. Evidence connected my father to treason. His jaw tightened. I know. And you signed anyway. Every guard went still. Ronan lowered his voice. I'm trying to keep you alive. Tessa looked at the men waiting to escort her away. That is what powerful men call it when they take away someone's choices. This is not punishment. Then open the door. He did not. Until that moment, Tessa had not realized how much of her trust had already moved toward him. That frightened her more than the accusation. Ronan said, "I need time." Tessa almost laughed. My father needed time too. He flinched. She wanted him to. A guard stepped forward. Tessa closed Elias's case file and pushed it toward Ronan. "Do not touch the blue ink orders without me. Test each one separately, and check who controlled the signet chest when you were at North Ridge 6 years ago." Ronan narrowed his eyes. "You're still working the case?" "They want me to stop." Lucien watched her with an unreadable expression. As Tessa passed Ronan, he caught her wrist, not hard, but enough to stop her. "If you know something you haven't told me, tell me now." She looked at his hand until he released her. "I know someone wants you afraid of what I might find." Then she walked out. Her room beside the archive no longer felt like hers. 2 new guards stood outside. The cabinet had been emptied. Her charcoal stick was gone. Even the chair had been moved away from the door. Tessa put it back. Then she sat. For the first time since Blackwater, she had no ledgers, maps, or sealed records. Only stone walls, a narrow window, and the memory of a message written in her father's code by someone who had never known him. That was the mistake. Whoever planted the parchment knew Elias Hale had used courier code, but they did not know how he had used it. Tessa closed her eyes and rebuilt the symbols. One mark had been wrong. Her father never used a straight line for midnight. He bent it. Always. When Tessa was 8, she had teased him that a straight midnight looked like a grave marker. Elias had changed the symbol after that and never changed it back. The message in her room used the official version. Whoever forged it had learned Elias Hale from records. Not from Elias Hale. Tessa opened her eyes. Someone had just tried to frame her with the same kind of mistake they had made with her father. And this time, she was still alive to answer it. This time, however, she intended to make the lie speak before it buried another innocent person. Tessa waited until the second guard change before asking for Mara Quinn. The name earned her a suspicious look. "Lower archive," Tessa said. "Third desk by the north wall. Tell her I need the blue inventory ledger. There is no blue ledger in your room." "I know." The guard stared at her, then left. Mara arrived 20 minutes later, with ink on her fingers and fear in her eyes. She was younger than Tessa, narrow-shouldered, always moving as if someone might call her back to work. "You're under restriction," Mara whispered. "So are the records I need." Mara looked toward the door. "Tessa." The code they found in my room was copied from an official manual. Mara stopped. "My father changed the midnight mark when I was a child. The person who wrote that message did not know him. They knew his file." Mara's face tightened. "You want me to steal something?" "No." Tessa leaned forward. "I want you to return something that should never have been buried." Mara disappeared for almost an hour. When she came back, she carried a thin leather notebook beneath her apron. Elias Hale's field book. "I found it in condemned records," Mara said. "My mother told me your father once stopped a quartermaster from blaming her for missing medicine. She said he saved her from prison." Tessa took the notebook carefully. "Then this is the last favor he gets to call in." They worked beside the narrow window while the guards remained outside. Elias had never written names. He had written numbers, convoy sizes, missing grain, reassigned patrols, dates of forged orders, units moved before raids no commander had predicted. Tessa built the pattern across the floor using scraps Mara smuggled from the archive. Every false order shifted men away from one region. Every time, the Western Legion gained something. More soldiers, more supplies, more authority. Not enough to accuse Lucien. Enough to know where to look. Tessa requested Ronan. He came alone. No crown, no council, no guards inside. His eyes went to the papers covering the floor. "You were told to stop." "I was told I could not enter the archive." "That is not the same thing?" "No." Irritation crossed his face. Tessa held up the planted code. "This was copied from an official courier manual. My father stopped using the straight midnight symbol when I was 8. Ronan looked at the mark. "So the writer knew the record, not the man." "Yes." He exhaled. "I should have seen that. You should have asked." The words landed between them. Ronan did not defend himself. "What do you need?" That was different. Not, "What are you doing?" Not, "What have you found?" What do you need? Tessa turned Elias's notebook toward him. 2 supply schedules. Ronan frowned. False orders? No, harmless information. Real wagons, real routes, nothing that puts anyone in danger. She pointed to 2 names. One says winter grain leaves through Miller's Gate at noon. The other says the same grain leaves through the South Gate at dusk. And we give each version to a different office. If someone is feeding our movements to the raiders, they will react to the version they receive. Ronan studied her. You want to use Stonehaven as bait. I want to use information as bait. And if they attack the wagons, they will be empty. A pause. You planned this while confined to 1 room. They took away the records, not my memory. Ronan almost smiled. She did not. If you want the truth, Tessa said, stop protecting me from it. His expression changed. I was trying to keep the council from tearing you apart. And you did it by removing my choices. I know. No, you understand the sentence. That is not the same as understanding the cost. Ronan said nothing. Tessa was grateful for that. An apology would have been easier than accountability, and she did not want easy. He nodded toward the papers. Your plan, your terms. The schedules went out before midnight. 1 to Quartermaster Dane's office. 1 to Marshal Lucien's military staff. Ronan stationed hidden scouts near both routes. At noon the next day, Miller's Gate remained quiet. At dusk, 3 riders appeared above the South Road. They did not attack. They watched. Then one released a black-feathered signal arrow toward the western hills. Ronan's scouts pursued them. 2 escaped. 1 was captured alive. He carried no insignia. Inside his saddlebag was a scrap of paper with the Southgate schedule, copied almost word for word. Tessa read it twice. Lucien's office had received that version. Ronan looked at her. Vos. No. The answer surprised him. The leak came through his office, Ronan said. That does not mean it came from him. Tessa. Someone did that to my father. She pushed the paper back across the table. They found the pattern they wanted and stopped looking. Ronan went silent. Tessa pointed toward the captured rider as guards led him into the lower keep. We investigate everyone who touched Lucien's copy. Clerks, aides, messengers, everyone. And Lucien? Especially Lucien. Ronan held her gaze, then nodded. No argument. No command overruling hers. For the first time, the investigation belonged to Tessa as much as it belonged to the king. And somewhere inside the Western Command, someone had just learned the trap had closed 1 step closer around them. By morning, everyone who had touched the Southgate schedule had been questioned. 3 clerks, 2 aides, a stable messenger, 1 quartermaster assistant who cried before Ronan even asked his name. None of them broke. Tessa believed that was useful. Guilty people lied differently. They over-explained. They corrected details no one had challenged. They remembered too much. So she stopped asking for confessions. She decided to make the truth volunteer itself. The full military council gathered after dusk. Lucien arrived last, composed as ever, silver hair immaculate, gloves folded beneath one arm. He took his usual place to Ronan's right and glanced at Tessa only once. Ronan opened the meeting. The rider captured on the South Road carried information copied from Marshal Voss's office. A murmur moved around the table. Lucien did not flinch. My staff numbers 23, he said. If one of them betrayed the crown, I want the name before sunrise. Tessa watched his hands. Still. 2 still meant nothing. She stepped forward. We found something else. Ronan said nothing. That was part of the plan. Tessa placed a sealed evidence box on the table but did not open it. Jonas Reed's dispatch tube was recovered beneath the old bridge west of the signal station. Lucien's eyes stayed on her. The clasp was broken, she continued. Silver. Royal issue. Captain Brenner swore under his breath. Tessa let the silence stretch. No one asked to see it. Good. There was no clasp. There was no recovered dispatch tube. Only a sentence placed carefully into a room full of men who wanted to know more than they should. Lucien leaned back. A broken clasp proves nothing. No, Tessa agreed. Anyone could have removed it before the body was moved from the watch station. The room changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Brenner looked at Lucien. Then at Ronan. Tessa felt her pulse slow. There it was. Lucien noticed 1 second too late. Ronan's voice dropped. What watch station? Lucian's expression did not move. The abandoned one on the western road? Who told you Reed's body had been there? A pause. Tiny. Fatal. Lucian looked around the table. I assumed it from your investigation. No report mentioned the station, Tessa said. The council was told Ghost found Reed outside Stonehaven. Lucian's jaw tightened. You rode west with the king. Soldiers talk. Then name the soldier. Silence. For the first time, Lucien Voss looked annoyed. Not afraid. Annoyed. He turned to Ronan. You are building treason out of a misplaced sentence. No, Tessa said. I am building a question. Lucien looked at her. And you have mistaken questions for proof before. She felt the strike exactly where he intended it. Her father. Ronan stepped forward. Tessa lifted one hand. Not yet. She would not let anger do what evidence had not. The council adjourned under guard. No one was permitted to leave the keep. Lucien walked out with his head high. Tessa waited until the doors closed. He knows the station. Ronan nodded. That is enough to detain him. No. His eyes narrowed. Why not? Because he will say an aide told him, or a guard, or a servant who overheard you. He lied. He made a mistake. That is not the same thing as proving murder. Ronan stared at her. You are protecting him. I am protecting the case. A low growl sounded near the doorway. Ghost. The royal wolf had been lying beside the hearth through the entire council session. Now he stood with his nose raised toward the corridor Lucien had taken. Ronan looked at Tessa. She nodded. They followed. Ghost moved through the western wing, past the officers' quarters, and down a narrow stone passage. He stopped outside Lucien's private office and scratched once at the door. Locked. Ronan broke it with his shoulder. The office was immaculate. Maps aligned by campaign year. Dispatch boxes labeled by region. No hidden blades. No blood. No dramatic confession waiting in a drawer. Ghost ignored the desk. He went to a cabinet beside the fireplace and growled. Ronan forced the lock. Inside were bottles of sealing wax, lamp oil, medicinal spirits, and 3 jars of writing resin. Tessa uncorked one. Pine. She held it near the flame. The liquid caught a faint blue sheen, the same blue that had appeared in the Blackwater order. Brenner, who had followed them, reached for his sword. Arrest him. Tessa closed the jar. No. Brenner stared at her as if she had lost her mind. Ronan did not. Explain. This office prepares field dispatches. Resin belongs here. Not that kind. Maybe. Maybe not. She looked at the shelf. If we take Lucien now, he says someone planted it. He blames an aide. Half the Western Legion believes him. Ronan's gaze hardened. What do you want? Tessa thought of Elias Hale, a man convicted by a room full of people who had stopped when the story became convenient. She would not repeat it. Nothing. Brenner frowned. This, met Ronan's eyes. Not yet. Lucien needed to believe they still lacked the thing that could destroy him. Proof. Ronan slowly shut the cabinet. Then we let him think we are still looking. Tessa nodded. And we give him a reason to move. Outside, somewhere beyond the western walls, a horn sounded once in the dark. Tessa looked toward the window. The trap was no longer about finding who had leaked a schedule. It was about forcing a man who knew too much to make one final mistake. By noon, Stonehaven had become a fortress inside a fortress. Western commanders were summoned from the barracks. Northern Alphas arrived under escort. Every entrance to the war hall was guarded by men Ronan had chosen himself. No officer entered armed except the king. Lucien Voss came anyway. He walked in wearing his marshal's coat, calm enough to make half the council doubt what they had seen the night before. Tessa stood beside the war table in the plain charcoal clothes of the royal map room. No silk, no jewels, nothing that belonged to Ronan. If she destroyed Lucien today, she wanted every person in the room to understand she had done it with records, not royal favor. Ronan closed the doors. We end this now. Tessa placed 8 documents across the table. The order that sent us toward Blackwater was written in false royal ink. She laid down the burned fragment. But the seal was genuine. Next came Jonas Reed's dispatch ledger. The courier, recorded as delivering it, was already dead. Then, the Western route page. His entry was altered. His route changed after the fact. She added the red sealing cloth. The station where he was held was connected to someone familiar with royal courier procedure. Then came Elias Hale's case. The same pine resin ink appears in the forged orders used 8 years ago to convict my father. Lucien folded his hands behind his back. A daughter defending a condemned traitor. Moving, but hardly surprising. Tessa continued. The method did not stop when Elias Hale died. She placed the 6-year-old order beside the others. This command carries the king's seal. It reassigned 40 soldiers from North Ridge. Lucien glanced at it. So? Tessa looked at Ronan. Where were you on that date? At North Ridge, recovering from a spear wound. Could you have returned to Stonehaven? Not for 3 days. And did you issue this? No. The room stirred. Tessa turned the page so everyone could see the date. Then someone used the royal seal while the king could not reach it. Lucien stepped forward and opened a leather folder. You want history? Then let us have all of it. He threw an old access register beside Elias's file. Elias Hale could enter the dispatch vault. He handled sealed tubes. He knew courier routes. His name appears beside the signet chamber twice before the first forged orders were discovered. Several officers looked at Tessa. Your father may not have worked alone, Lucien said, but do not make him a saint because others continued what he began. For 1 second, Tessa saw exactly how Elias had lost. Not with one perfect lie, with true details arranged in the wrong order. She lifted the 6-year-old command. Who held the signet chest while the king was at North Ridge? No one answered. Tessa placed the custody ledger beside it. One signature appeared across all 5 days. Lucien Vos. Silence struck the room. Lucien looked at Ronan. You gave me that authority. I did. And the kingdom survived because I used it. There was no denial. Only a change in posture, as if an old man had grown tired of pretending. Lucien faced the council. You think peace keeps a kingdom together? It doesn't. Fear does. Pressure does. Give the Pax 10 quiet years, and they remember every blood debt their grandfathers carried. The border wars gave them 1 enemy instead of 20. Tessa stared at him. The dead villages were strategy. They were arithmetic. Ronan's voice dropped. And Elias? He found numbers he was never meant to understand. Brenner shoved back his chair. Lucien ignored him and looked at Ronan. You can still contain this. Condemn me. Call me traitor. The crown survives. His gaze shifted to Tessa. But clear Elias Hale. And you reopen every judgment tied to those years. Every family will ask whether its dead were guilty. Your enemies will not hear honesty, Ronan. They will hear weakness. Tessa understood. Lucien was offering him the easier truth. One where Lucien took the blame, and the king's old signature disappeared beneath it. Ronan stepped to the center of the room. Elias Hale was executed under my authority. No one breathed. The evidence against him was false. Lucien's face hardened. The signature on his death order was mine. Ronan looked directly at Tessa. The failure was mine. Something in her chest opened, not forgiveness, not yet, but space where certainty had been. Lucien moved. Now, 6 Western officers lunged from the rear. Royal Guards met 4. The 5th went for Brenner. Lucien went for Ronan. Steel flashed from beneath his sleeve. A narrow blade. Tessa saw blue-green residue along the leather binding. Pinedicin. No. Ronan twisted as Lucien struck. The blade missed his ribs. Ronan caught his wrist, drove him against the war table, and tore the weapon free. Seconds later, Lucien was on his knees with Ronan's sword at his throat. Do it, Lucien said. Ronan raised the blade. Alive, Tessa said. He froze. Lucien smiled faintly. Still telling kings what to do? If he dies here, half the kingdom hears whatever story his men choose. Tessa faced Lucien. If he lives, he gets a trial. Ronan held the sword there for 1 long second, then lowered it. Chain him. The guards dragged Lucien to his feet. Around them, commanders who had followed Lucien for years watched chains close and realized they had nearly obeyed him into another war. For 8 years, Tessa had imagined justice as a body falling. Instead, it looked like a king choosing not to swing the sword. And for the first time since her father's death, the truth would leave the war hall alive. Lucien Vos did not die in the war hall. For 3 weeks, Stonehaven heard him speak. The trial was held with the doors open and the gallery packed from sunrise until dusk. Officers testified about altered orders. Couriers produced route books. Quartermasters admitted shipments had been redirected under commands they believed carried the king's authority. The rider captured on the South Road named 2 Western aides. One named a captain. The captain named Lucian. The evidence did not arrive as one dramatic confession. It accumulated, page by page, year by year, until the kingdom could finally see the machine hidden inside its own government. Lucian never begged. When judgment was read, he said only, "You will miss the wars when peace begins, costing you more." Ronan answered, "Then we will pay for peace honestly." Lucian was sentenced to death after the public record was completed, but Tessa did not attend the execution. She went to the Hall of Judgment. Along one wall, iron plaques carried the names of those condemned for treason. Tessa found her father halfway down the 3rd column. Elias Hale, forger, traitor, enemy of the crown. A mason waited with a hammer and chisel. Ronan stood several feet back. The mason drove the chisel beneath the first pin. The plaque broke loose. Tessa caught it before it hit the floor. For 8 years she had imagined this moment as triumph. Instead, the iron felt strangely light. "The official judgment has been overturned," Ronan said. "Every charge against Elias Hale is withdrawn." Tessa ran her thumb over her father's name. "And the others?" "All cases connected to the forged dispatch network are being reopened." "How many?" 47. She looked at him. "Some may still have been guilty," Ronan said. "This time we prove it before we punish them." That mattered more than an apology. The reforms began before winter ended. No execution could be authorized by sealed order alone. Military commands affecting troop movement required secondary verification. Signet custody was logged by 2 independent officers. The archive received authority to challenge any command with irregular ink, route marks, or seals. Ronan offered Tessa control of that office. Royal Keeper of Maps and Dispatches. She read the appointment twice. "You realize this lets me delay one of your orders?" "Yes." "And demand your seal records?" "Yes." "And tell you when you're wrong?" Ronan's mouth shifted slightly. "Especially then." She signed. Not Luna. Not Queen. Tessa Hale. That was enough. Weeks passed. Stonehaven became quieter, though not peaceful. Families arrived with old judgment papers clutched in shaking hands. Some cursed Ronan in the courtyard. He let them. One evening, Tessa sat alone in the map room correcting a river route when Ghost padded inside and dropped his enormous head across her knee. "You're blocking the southern road," she told him. Ghost closed his eyes. The door opened behind her. Tessa did not turn. Ronan stopped. "You didn't check the door." "No." It took him a moment to understand why. When he did, he said nothing. He crossed the room and placed a folded cloak on the chair beside her, rather than around her shoulders. "I don't expect you to forgive me for Elias," he said. "Good." Ronan almost smiled. "Because I'm not finished being angry." "I assumed not." Tessa finally looked at him. Outside, the inner gates stood open to the evening road. Merchants were leaving before dark. Soldiers returned without anyone stopping them. Ronan held out his hand. "No order. No claim. Walk with me?" Tessa looked at his palm. Then, at the open gates. For most of her life, safety had meant knowing where the exits were. Now, the nearest one stood wide enough for her to leave. She put her hand in his anyway. Ghost rose and trotted ahead as they crossed the courtyard. Tessa did not know what she and Ronan would become. She did not need a prophecy to tell her. She did not need a bond to trap her there. For the first time, staying and leaving belonged equally to her. And that was why, when the Alpha King walked toward the open gate, Tessa Hale chose to walk beside him.